single parenting, but as a single dad, not as a single mom. Single parenting as a father, yeah, it's got its own unique challenges, not to diminish anything that single mothers go through, but we need to be aware that there's another side to the whole single parenting challenge in society, and how it is that we need to be able to show up and support them. And if we're not going to support them, at least we mustn't add to the difficulty in being a single parent. But I don't think it's any different to the challenges that a dual parent home has. But the dynamics and the challenges, the intensity of the challenges and the complexity of having to navigate some of those things are very different. Support the discussions, because even though the focus is on single parenting, from a man's perspective, it highlights a lot of challenges that we face as a community, and we need to rise to the challenges that face us as a community, even though it might not affect us in our individual capacity, because we benefit in the end from having that kind of social cohesion. Most people I come across, the majority of the problems they're experiencing in life is because they've forgotten how to laugh at themselves. And the more mistakes you make, the more material you've got to laugh at. So you guys need to lighten up. I see a lot of often I post something that's tongue in cheek on my Facebook feed or on any one of the social media feeds, and you always get someone that takes it literally and then goes into lecture mode and social justice mode and all of that. And it's like, seriously, man, come on, we can't be so serious and so earnest and deep about every single thing in life. It removes the very reason for wanting to actually get this right. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you're doing it wrong. It's not that you're doing the wrong thing, it's that you're doing it wrong. So, learn to laugh at yourself a bit. Just make sure you're laughing at yourself more than you're laughing at others. Otherwise, you're gonna get that wrong as well, and then you're gonna have another thing to regret, and another thing to be serious about, and another thing to be upset about. So yeah, hopefully those of you that are watching now and that will tune in just now, I hope you take time to actually just have a good giggle at some of the really stupid things you've done in life. It might have caused some serious crap at the time, but hey, you didn't know any different, or you didn't know better. And even if you did get good advice that you didn't take, you had good reason not to take that advice at the time. It could have been stupidity, it could have been arrogance, it could have been you were raging at the wrong people, or whatever the case was. But the point is, with everything being true at the time, there was no way you were going to do it differently. So laugh at yourself a bit. Laugh at yourself for being stupid. Just don't laugh at yourself for being cruel towards others when you have the option to be kind. Because that's a reflection of how you feel about yourself more than it is a reflection of how you feel about others.
Assalamualaikum. Welcome back to From Under the Rug. I'm your host, Mas-oodah Jappie. Welcome back to the discussion of single parents equals a broken home. Up next, we have Brother Ismail, who's going to be joining us. They is a self-published author of a non-fiction book, the book entitled On Your Life. He's also been experienced in professional business, report writing, for a career of 25 years in corporate. He's a veteran blogger who's been actively blogging about the human condition for more than 20 years. He regularly creates content about mental health and is a mental health activist in social media and local community radios and TV stations. A definite need for today's discussion, and it's also a single dad. So we'll be going to be chatting to him, so let's welcome him to the program. Assalamu alaikum, Brother.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah for having you on your show.
Alhamdulillah. We ended up the discussion on the previous guest with regards to everyday struggles. And the discussion is always focused around single moms. Wherever we go, I think that's the major focus. And single dads are kind of left out of the equation. From your experience, what is society's stigma attached to single dads?
Funny enough, there isn't much of a stigma attached to single dads because we're pretty much invisible for the most part. So,
okay. So my question being rather, Is it seen as one, besides being invisible, like not being noticed as in such, but rather is it more applauded in that sense in comparison to a single mom?
No, I actually think that people are so awkward about having to have discussions about single fathers and single dads who have pretty much primary caregiving responsibility for their children. People are so awkward around it, they don't know how to approach it, that they generally avoid the discussions. It's only the people in the very immediate circles that might engage on it, but the rest of the time we kind of leave them to do what they need to do, and we go about our business because we tend to avoid things that are awkward.
All right. So looking at this, this is a stark difference with regards to single moms, where we kind of push to the edge, but we've spoken about in a much more negative way. I do think in my entire life, which is like 34 years, subhanAllah, I might have only, besides yourself, heard of approximately 3 other single dads who have probably taken care of the kids. And like you said, they are invisible in that sense, taking care of what needs to be done. I do want to add on here that the topic that we're discussing today revolves around the concept of a broken home. And I think the state itself, especially with regards to a broken home, whether it's referring to anyone, not necessarily just single parents, but the word broken home just grates my soul because I feel like something is deficient. How would you define a broken home?
I think a broken home is one in which the people in that home feel as if they're invisible. And I know I'm using that word a lot, but that's really how we get to that point in the first place. We get to the point of divorce because of exactly that reason, and we get to the point of children who behave badly because for the same reason. We need to feel significant, and in a home where the people who are supposed to be most significant feel as if they have no place there, that's a broken home to me, because it's not a home, it's just a house with people living together. And we've kind of completely distorted our understanding of what home actually should feel like, because we focused on home being a place rather than a sense of belonging.
I love that definition. I also like the fact that you've added it's not necessarily considered, where you'd have a single parent taking care of kids being a broken home. And I think that's the one takeaway that we should really focus on, that our understanding of what's broken is necessarily just the relationship between the people within that home, with either living past each other. And the one thing that we can also make mention of is the fact that anything broken can be fixed.
Yes.
In a way, I'm talking about it could be salvaged, it could be fixed, it could be changed even. But the concept of it being a place that we always just think of instead of actually being attached to people. How do we, as single parents, empower ourselves in this regard, irrespective of society's stigmas?
I think the most empowering thing is to stop seeing yourself through society's eyes. Because and I see the struggle both with single dads and single moms, is that we're so focused on how it is that society perceives us, how they treat us, how they respond to us, how they react to what we need or what we're going through, that we lose sight of our capability to be able to power through and to be fulfilled and inspirational in our own lives without needing that validation. And because we're so fixated on terms like a broken home and a broken family and things like that, and the stigmas around that we lose ourselves to trying to prove them wrong.
Do you become rebellious then as a single parent?
I think the moment you're rebellious, you're actually playing to the agenda of society, because you're still focused on challenging something that you disagree with. And the moment you're challenging something you disagree with, you're not actually putting your effort into what it is that you want to do. So rebelliousness, protesting, social justice causes and all of that, it's a distraction. It's not a solution. Mm-hmm. So we can raise awareness about this, the difficulties, fair enough. But we mustn't spend our life trying to prove a point.
Mm-hmm. I ask on a personal level,
Sure.
What challenges do you face as a single dad?
As a single dad, the challenges I face, and I've got 2 daughters, right? And the one is still living with me, the other one is married and living with her husband. So the challenges I face as a single father in having raised them through the teenagers and things like that is that I had to come to grips with the fact that I would never be as emotionally in tune as a woman is, as a female is. So to be able to connect with my daughters in a way that that made them comfortable and didn't leave them grappling for understanding, I needed to reinvent myself, because I couldn't continue to hold myself to the kind of stereotypical views of what a man is expected to show up as or what they should be capable of. And that's one of the biggest challenges for any single parent, be it a man or a woman, is that you can't afford to hold on to what is the norm, because what you're trying to achieve goes against the norm.
So your new normal is something that you need to redefine.
In fact, there is no normal. You just have to be you. And you need to connect with what is uniquely true about your situation with your children, because every single situation, I promise you, no matter how similar the circumstances, the dynamics of what's playing out in that home where the single parent is trying to connect with their children and trying to give them a sense of belonging in this world and all of those, and self-worth and everything else, the dynamics that play out around that in every single scenario is completely unique. So if you're going to keep shaping yourself or looking to others for guidance on how it is that you should do this, you're going to get it wrong, because you're trying to implement someone else's solution in a situation that they can't relate to.
And I think that also goes for, earlier we used the term whole parent families, where we have two parentals there. When you take a look at that, they could also be that way. You struggle to connect with your children, and you struggle to be able to find what works, So the challenges are the same. Yes, in the sense of like raising our children, that's the standard. However, the way in which we deal with things now is extremely different. Do you find that you take more charge of issues or become more protective as a single father?
I think we definitely do have reason to. In fact, while you were saying that, I thought occurred, and I think I can share this in a kind of roundabout way of answering your question. With the amount of difficulties that we have as a community, as society, in the dynamics that are playing out between men and women, around gender roles evolving and changing shape and form and expectation in so many different ways, and at a pace that we're struggling to keep up with, I would go as far as suggesting that you find it significantly more difficult to raise grounded children in a two-parent home these days than the possibility of getting it right as a single parent. And the reason for that is because there are, as much as a two-parent home is ideally the way we want to go, I struggle to come across many two-parent homes these days that are actually healthy, because of the conflict between the adults, and that conflict then kind of marginalizes the presence of the children and what it is that they need to take. So unless you're in a two-parent home that is emotionally available and healthy to everyone that's part of that home, your challenges are probably more significant than the single parent, because that conflict is not there for the single parent for the most part, even though there might be conflict with the ex-partner in some cases and things like that. Containing it within the home, you have a lot more influence over that than for someone who has to constantly play out that conflict directly in front of the children because the two adults don't get along.
I would love to be able to add to that, with regards to not getting along. A lot of the times, like you said, we don't know how to be able to then take care of our personal relationship. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of overflows into into what our children happen to see, and that too is not something for them to see. Because we're going to argue, we're going to have disagreements, and that's quite normal. But then how we also go about it is something very important. This is just generally my own advice and observation. Taking a look at the time, we're going to be going for a quick break now because it is 11:15. When we get back, inshallah, I'm going to ask you to please expand more and talk more about our children and the way their reality changes. Right here on From Under the Rug, single parents equate a broken home. So there's lots to unpack for this morning. I've learned so much myself as a single mom, but at the same time, there's still so much to speak about. So for our listeners who would love to be able to share, I do know there's lots of single moms who've been messaging me to Jazakumullahu khairan. If unfortunately I don't have the permission to share all their stories, but definitely there's so much that we can go on. But we have found as a very great resounding response is the fact that there is a great need for us to have this discussion where we bring light to topics like this, in such a way that we can initiate change, that we can start thinking differently. Earlier I mentioned the statistic, which is actually quite scary, that 40% of, and this was stats from 2019, which is not so far off, I mean, it could be even more now, that 40% of South African mothers are single mothers. And it is scary to note that this is the case. Unfortunately, I don't have stats about single dads, but this is what they do have. And the scary part is that this is the new norm. It's not just an isolated, a few people in our community. So we need to actually just reach out and ultimately learn a bit more and find out how we can make a difference. Joining us, we have Zaid Ismail, and we continue our discussion. We stopped off earlier where we said we're going to be speaking more about our kids as single parents. How does their reality change, Zaid?
Oh, okay. Children's reality changes in a really difficult way. And I don't think that there's enough awareness about how this weighs down on children, because the focus is so much on the struggling single parent, single mom or single dad. And children either end up with a lot more resilience, or they end up with a lot more demons. It's very seldom that you find a balance between the two. And the reason for that is because what they're supposed to get from each parent, as far as the building up of their character and their makeup and their sense of self is concerned, is now just been completely disrupted. So finding their place in this world becomes that much more difficult. Not only, I would say probably the vast majority of cases where the home is separated, is split up, where the parents go through a divorce, the vast majority of those cases is acrimonious. It's usually unhealthy relationships that lead to that breakup, and the result is that the divorce doesn't solve the problems that got them to that point, which means that the problems that they were experiencing interpersonally usually intensify or escalate, because now there's a power struggle for influence and significance over the children, rather than, or even with each other, to prove a point that who was wrong in the marriage in the first place. So with that being true, the children are forgotten, because they become this responsibility that we have, rather than become this focus of a human that needs to be nurtured into a healthy adult. And that's one of the problems, is that both for two-parent homes and single-parent homes, we forget that we're raising adults. We still think that we're raising children. We're not. We're preparing children for adult life. And if we don't prepare them adequately, guess what? They make the same mistakes that we made, because that's what they were exposed to. And then we look at it and we think, generational trauma. It's not generational trauma. It's just distractedness in the parent side.
I want to actually comment on this, which is something very important. We take a look at our children mimicking everything, because they're great at mimicking, irrespective of their age. Like you mentioned, they mirror what they see. So this is something that, whether you are a single parent or you're not, this is a way in which we can start reflecting and working upon ourselves. If they see us getting angry about every little thing, remember, that's going to be the norm that they find acceptable. So we're looking at, besides having to deal with everything emotionally, what they see how you deal with problems. Are you the problem solver? Are you the one who throws the tantrum? Are you the one who calmly deals with things? Or, it could go either way. So, like you said earlier when you mentioned that you start a lot of introspection, or you start a lot of introspection yourself, and you find yourself reinventing yourself. This is one aspect that I think we all should do, whether you are a single parent or not. Having a 12-year-old, so she's literally just almost on the verge of becoming a teenager, there's lots of challenges that I face myself. The one thing that I noticed throughout the years is there's a lot of anger, not necessarily targeted at myself or her dad for that matter, but there's a lot of anger there. How do you then deal with a child who has so much of anger?
I think one of the things we need to understand is anger on its own, across the board, whether a child or an adult, anger is a defense mechanism. So anger is not what we should be concerned about. We should be concerned about why it is that they feel vulnerable about something that they feel and need to defend themselves about. And for children especially, and this again, it's a universal rule, because we're all human at the end of the day. We just at different stages in our development as humans. So when we see children behaving badly, we need to recognize that the reason they're behaving badly is because they feel unappreciated or they feel as if they are insignificant. So anger is a means that we use to demand significance when we feel that who we are is not enough.
I can resonate with that because it touched on so many different points, and my brain literally just lit up. So I know there's lots data on that as well. But like you mentioned, there's something that's deeper, that's lying definitely deeper. But when we find that our children are closed off, so I have an expressive child who expresses herself a lot. What happens in the case where you have a child who's completely introverted?
The fact that they appear introverted means that they don't feel as if what they're experiencing will be appreciated or will be seen for what it is within the context of how they're experiencing it. So the only reason we don't make ourselves available to any situation, to any other person, for that matter, is because we lack trust in how they're going to respond to us. So if our children are in that way with us as parents, then that means that there's a problem in the trust relationship between us and our children, and we often lose that trust because we're so focused on being a parent that we forget to show up as a human for them. And you can't be emotionally accessible as a parent because that's a role that you're defined by. You can only be emotionally available to your children if you allow yourself to be human with them. And this brings up another very important point that I want to touch on. Forgive the tangent, but it's more often than not, single parents especially think that they have to be strong for their children. So they mustn't allow them to see weakness, and they mustn't allow them to see the struggle, and they mustn't allow them to see their vulnerability and all of these things. And in the process, they become hardened, and they become insensitive, and they become robotic in their way. What they don't realize is that when you don't allow your child to see you go through weakness, to see you go through vulnerability, and to deal with that in a way that is human, you prevent them from learning how to deal with it when they're inevitably going to experience something like that later in life. So
I'm very glad you brought that up. That was actually almost similar to my next question. But that is so true when it comes to us as parents, because in that way, you kind of close yourself off. So they also at that time become strong for you. I think if that's the way they're seeing it. So mom's being strong for me, I need to be strong for her. Or dad's being strong for me, I need to be strong for him. And the cycle will eventually come where you're like living past each other almost.
Yes.
And it becomes a very, I'm not going to say fake, I'm going to say superficial relationship, where it's not one where you can truly say, like you said, where you're not showing up as a human for your kids. Looking at the time, and I do know you have to run away in a bit, what would you like to leave our listeners with, especially our single parents?
I think the most important thing you can do for yourself, and you need to be almost selfish in this way, because the consequences of this selfishness that I'm suggesting is going to be, inshallah, extremely beneficial for your children, is that you need to reconnect with who you are as a human. Stop seeing yourself through the lens of the role that you have to play, the obligations that you have, the responsibilities that you have, because it's in losing our own humanness, in losing touch with who we are as a person, our sense of self, that hardens us in the way we show up for others. So the way we feel about ourselves is what we expect from others. If we have no tolerance for getting things wrong for ourselves because we judge ourselves harshly, we will be intolerant towards mistakes that our children make. And one critical piece of advice that I kind of still today, and I think for the rest of my life I'll be reminding myself about, is that whenever I see my children behaving in a way that I am unhappy with, rather than being displeased with them, I need to remind myself that my job as a parent is not yet done. And people that think that their job as a parent is done when the children get married, you're doing a major disservice to yourself and to your children. Because that is what that obligation mindset, that responsibility and that role mindset leads itself to, is that we automatically assume that we have a limited kind of tenure or period in which we are influential or responsible in their lives, and after that what they do is their problem, and we must finally have our life for ourselves. You've lost the sweetness of life if you approach it that way. And then you're going to be chasing distractions to feel as if the struggle was worth it. It's not. You need to reconnect with yourself as a human, and you need to make yourself available as a human to your children so that they can also feel human in the process. And just to touch on what you mentioned just now, it's not just about you being strong for your children and allowing them to be strong for you in return. It's about the fact that they realize that feeling vulnerable, feeling overwhelmed, or being upset about things, it's completely human and natural, and how we respond to that is how they see us navigating our way through it. So that when they feel those emotions overwhelming them, they won't judge themselves harshly for thinking that they're weak or they're inadequate in some way. They'll allow themselves to be human, and they'll focus on understanding why, so that they can recover from it. And that's how it is that children do what we do, rather than doing what we say. Because it's not just in how we discipline them, but it's also in what they take from how we deal with the events in life in front of them.
Jazakumullah khairan. This is absolutely an amazing contribution. I think everyone needs to hear it. Inshallah, for our listeners who have asked, who's not available for this morning's program, would love to hear it. We will be making this available as a podcast, inshallah, and we'll be spreading it out soon. Jazakumullah khairan, Brother Zaid, for joining us. It has absolutely been inspirational talking to you. Lots of light bulbs have been going off for myself as a single parent and as a human being in general. Jazakumullah khairan once again for joining us.
Ameen. Jazakallah for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I look forward to your comments. For those of you that pick up on this interview later, please drop your thoughts, and if you disagree with anything I've said, please challenge me. I want to be kept honest about this. So if I'm missing something, or I'm assuming incorrectly, or I'm projecting in some way, you need to keep me honest by having the discussion with me, rather than walking away and going to talk to someone else about it. Because we don't improve the awareness and the maturity of the discussion in society if we keep avoiding conflict. But how we conduct ourselves in that conflicting view is what's important. So hopefully we can raise the bar in how we conduct ourselves in that space. Jazakallah. I'm really always excited to have these discussions. But until next time, Assalamu alaikum.